I have a story to tell you. Because of my position, I go to a lot of product demos, some in my company, some outside my company, so you'll never get out of me where I was when I went through this product demo. But I went through a product demo, and oh boy, if they could have hit a speed bump or an accident or any kind of problem that could have cropped up, it happened in this demo. And I felt so bad for the presenter, but also the inner development, early career Brian within me just was, saying, I've been there. If I had a nickel for every time that a product demo went wild, I would have a bunch of nickels. I'm getting there.
You are getting there. Product demos, yeah. So these are necessary evils, I'd say, right? You have something you've built within your organization. You have to show it to people so they can get interested in buying it. So you can't get around it. You have to have product demos. And I've been to a lot of those myself. I've actually conducted a lot of demos myself as well in a previous life. So, the whole point about product demos is you go in there with intent to show your best product, right? You put your best foot forward.
Right.
And you hope everything goes well if the stars align, which they don't always. And things do go wrong. Often, actually. So in this podcast, we can kind of scratch the surface of what might go wrong, how can you get prepared for that, and what to do if you find yourself in that situation.
I'm using the term product demo very liberally because it could be a sprint review, it could be a conference demo, any of those things where you're demonstrating the software or you have a beta software or brand new software features or whatever that the customer's seeing for the first time.
Yeah.
Any of those are applicable. But again, I just sat through this demo and everything that could have went wrong, like the server crashed, and then you had performance scalability issues that were apparent, and then when the data did come back, it was the wrong data, and everything that could have went wrong went wrong. But again, I'm one of those early adopter users where even with bugs, if I have to click it a couple times and refresh the page, I'm still going to get to the outcome. I want to see it through to the end. No amount of blow-ups or spillovers or whatever are going to deter me from sticking to the demo. I'm that kind of user.
So that's a good point. So you're that kind of user, right? And the person doing the demo has to understand his audience.
Right.
If they're open to that, great, right? Just roll with the punches, right? But if they're not, here I'm thinking about not necessarily like sprint demos where you've your audience, because they've been to many sprint demos. If you're at a demo where external folks come, maybe a trade show, whatever it might be, convention, right? And you're demoing to audience that is heretofore unknown to you, right? And things go wrong. Now, to rescue the situation really is in the hands of the demonstrator, largely. There's usually somebody else, right, overseeing this as well. There's usually somebody in sales or marketing, who's doing the talking over, right? They maybe introduce the product, what it does. They introduce the company, and then they introduce the demonstrator, and then the demonstrator then runs with it, and things perhaps fall over, right? So at that point, it can either be the person who did the initial talking, right, or it could be the demonstrator who tries to quote unquote rescue the situation here, right? But if you don't know your audience, like you were saying, you're okay if you have to hit refresh twice. People in the audience are looking to potentially buy the product.
Yeah.
You don't know how that's going to rub them the wrong way, perhaps, right? So as a demonstrator, what can you do? Or if you're one of those salespeople or marketing people, what can you do? I always find that making light of the situation is always a strategy, because it buys time for the demonstrator to perhaps hit that second refresh, change something in what they've done, and then hit the query again or whatever they've done. That's always a good way to go. Make light of the situation and do it that way. I've been in demos where the audience has been in the hundreds, and you try something, it's worked every single time because you prepped it, right? You practiced it, and it worked. Except on the day, it didn't. I'd say, okay, I'll try that one more time with interest. This time, do it with sincerity, right? And then try it. That's my second refresh. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, just say, well, if it were to work, maybe it'll work this time. That's my third refresh. So you can find yourself in those situations quite easily. The other thing you can kind of hope to get away with, and you don't always, right, is to say, we add in new features, right? And this is beta software. You get what you get because we want to show you everything that we have thus far, right? I could show you a release that's safe and stable, that's 2 weeks old, where everything just works, but you're not going to be able to see this new functionality, at least the direction that we're heading down, right? That gives you a little bit of a pass, but if it happens over and over, it can really bury you.
even the idea of a sprint demo is that it's like a snowball. The more it rolls, the larger it gets. That's the idea. The idea should be your customer satisfaction.
Right.
The more it rolls, the more the customer sees, the happier they should become. So if they ask for something tiny and, hey, I like this feature, but it doesn't really solve the problem. What I really needed was this other thing. You created a, let me think about a feature for a second. There's one that I want to reference. There was a feature one time where you take a picture of a document and then you send it to your home office. Like I've talked on the podcast a bunch of times about working in logistics, right? So the truck driver has documents. They get a signature on their documents. So the document's delivered. They take a picture and then they send it to their home office. Their home office can then process the delivery and get paid for it because they have the signature. They have the paperwork right away. That's great. What's faster is all the little fields that are on the document. They get read and OCR'd and then automatically entered in the system so that somebody in home office doesn't have to manually
rekey it.
Yeah, rekey all those values and then potentially make mistakes.
Sure.
Okay. So that was like the next evolution. So they might get a demo, take a picture of the document. There it is. Press the button. Now it's in your home office. It's in your inbox. It's in your workflow queue, whatever it is, ready to process. And they might see it in the demo and it's like, wow, that's really great. That's cool. I can get started on the document right away. But what do you think if we could OCR these values and do whatever? Wow, well, at Brian and Ohm Software Development Company, we never thought about working with OCR technology. But why don't we go see what's on the market, see what the cost is, try a few of them, try 2-3 of them, and then next sprint demo, we'll demonstrate which ones we think are the best, and we'll demonstrate how it might work on your document to you. Right. And then if you like it, then we'll put it in the application. And then the next sprint demo, you're basically working off of what their requests were last time. Maybe you'll do other stuff in your sprint, probably. That might not take all of your time, right? But that wiggle room that you get, like they're paying your bills now. You know what I mean? They're super happy. Next sprint, hey, here's the top OCR engine in the industry or whatever. Works really great. Works 90% of the time for your documents. Maybe that's good enough, right? Do you want us to implement it? Yes, we want to implement it. Okay, well, if we implement it, there's licensing. All that stuff has licensing fees and whatnot.
Sure.
You have to pay this much additional. Sure, no problem. Super easy decision. Now, boom, development team just made some money. And now we got to go back to the people that see development as a cost center and say, hey, look, we made money. And then we break their brains. And then everyone gets fired. That's what I'm trying to say. You see what I did?
Oh my God.
I introduced a whole different podcast.
Yeah, it is a different podcast, sure.
Like, what are you going to do when you're not a cost center anyway? Like that was, I don't know if I'm going to leave this in or cut it out of the podcast so we can stay on the topic and not have me whining and complaining about software finance again. The more that you demo, and those users that saw something last time, hey, we did this with OCR. We're picking numbers off of your documents or letters or whatever, characters off your documents, and we're putting it down in fields. Even if that blows up, server crashes or whatever in the middle of the demo, those customers are still invested. Their willingness to go along for the ride because they are bought in already. That is different than when you're demoing to somebody that you're trying to make a sales to.
Exactly.
Someone that you're trying to make a sale to for the first time. Someone who doesn't know that your company is not the kind of company where you ask for something and then you write your congressman and then you copy it in triplicate and you send it into the void and then you get a megaphone and you scream into the void and then 3 months later maybe you get a status report from a project manager and you know what I mean, like that kind of thing, like the normal. Ask for an enhancement from Facebook and see what you get, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right. Internal customers, I'll just say, right, people that you're demoing to with your sprint reviews frequently, it could be external, but people that are known to you, right? Yeah. To your point, they're vested. If the server crashes or whatever, and you excuse them and say, look, it's just going to take me another 5 minutes to reboot, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, I mean, if you've got audience that's just coming in for the first time, looking at your product, they don't really maybe even know your company that well, right? So it's not just the product functionality that they're looking for. They're looking for the company as well, right? How are the company members treating them? All of that. If it blows up the first time, it is really up to the person doing the demo to find a way to sidestep it, find a way, reboot the server, whatever it takes, right? In my experience, there's a whole plethora of strategies that can be employed here, depending on your experience level doing demos.
The other one that I deal with more recently in my line of work is the shuffle that you and the salespeople have to do when you're demoing anything that involves an LLM or any kind of machine learning type of model in any way, shape, or form. Like everybody knows those models take a while. After you hit run, they take a while. So you got to do a little story or a little shuffle or tell them a little bit about what's happening on the back end, and then hope that your
results are good.
Yeah, hope that
they come through.
Hope that your input is known. You know what I mean? That was what you were saying, is like, hey, I've done this demo a million times,
right?
And I know it comes back in less than 15 seconds. So I got a few little prepared quips, stories, things that take about 15 seconds. I think the funny thing about this is salespeople are trained in this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's like on the job training that they're trained in this kind of thing, or maybe they get trained by the company in the how to present the product or whatever. But very rarely does the product team, the product manager, developers, QA people, whoever, like sit with a salesperson and get critiqued on, hey, this is kind of how you could improve this skill, and these are ways you can do better. Just some feedback on the method of demoing. That's super valuable. I think of maybe one company I've ever been at, maybe one or two, single digit number, regardless, that have ever been in a position where the people in sales, marketing, and whatnot actually sit in the demo and then gave me some feedback about, like, here are some ways that you could have connected and things that you could have done to improve your presentation skill and your demonstration of the software and how you tell your story and lead through. That's I don't know, it's kind of sad when I think about it.
It is. I was just going to say, what a lost opportunity, because that's really the easiest way to get feedback is from your own staff, from your own salespeople, marketing people, product marketing, what have you, right? This is a safe environment when you're doing your practice sessions. So get that feedback and then really hone your technique. So when you do have to do a demo for quote unquote for real, right? You've incorporated that feedback. But some of the good salespeople, though, you can't. First of all, look, let's just acknowledge that you can't really prepare for all eventualities. Things will just happen, right, out of the blue. And in that situation, for example, where you've run this query several times, you know it comes back somewhere between 9 and 15 seconds every time, right? You do it in the demo and 15 seconds go by and nothing. Still spinning the spinner, another 5 seconds go by, and now you're starting to get anxious as a demonstrator. It's like, what's going on here, right? So again, either yourself, if you have some experience, or one of the salespeople could say, in the previous version, this used to take 25 seconds, right? And then let's say the query returns in 18. Now, it's less than 25, right? So that situation has been turned around at that point. You can just say, we've improved this. We've done nothing really different, probably. It's just how you kind of overcome the situation. As a demonstrator, you could do the same thing. You could say 9 times out of 10, this comes back in 20 seconds, right? And you know that to be, you're really being economical with the truth, let's face it, right? You know that to be not quite true because it comes back, let's say 15 seconds or less seconds. So it's a little longer. And then it actually comes back in 18, you still don't look as bad. If it comes back in 20, you don't look as bad because you've set the expectation now. Right? And that only happened in the moment when you hit it and you went past the 15 and it hasn't come back yet. Last thing you should do is just simply sit there and stare at the screen. Or even worse is, gee, what's taking it so long? That's what really pulls the good demonstrators away from the ones that have done it a while, right? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things like that you can get better at with practice, right? And practice with your internal staff, to your point, is invaluable. Oh, one more on the audience engagement. So if you don't really know your audience, be very careful in being bold with them and say, hey, would one of you like to come up and hit the keys on the keyboard? Or would you like to role play? Right? I know the intent is good, right? Because you're trying to say this isn't really canned. It can backfire on you. I've seen it backfire, not because the audience is like doing this maliciously or anything. I've seen it backfire because the person that was selected from the audience, English wasn't their first language. And when they were asked to do something, they just misinterpreted it totally. And they were confused. Well, now seeing them confused, everybody else in the audience is not going to get a good vibe from this, right? So just know your audience.
There's two things inside of knowing your audience that I think about as real important concerns for me. Number one is their technical proficiency.
Right.
So it depends on the feature you're showing them, but if you're showing them something deep, something requires a lot of, like, I think about like a data analytics product that I worked on where we were publishing data, like low level data. You can go to the catalog, select your data source, and then pick the columns out of your data source. So it's sort of like a simplified SQL type of deal. That requires people to understand, like, oh, what are these fields for that we want? You know, what data source do I need? You know, if I want to get a particular type of report or build a particular dashboard. if they have very little data proficiency, like they're going to struggle in that. The other side of technical proficiency is that something about their use cases, their pain points that they're trying to solve, you know something about it ahead of time. You know that this particular group is trying to build dashboards, is struggling because they don't have access to all these different data sources they need to build the dashboards. Every time they go get a different data source, they got to get permissions and sign-offs and et cetera. And if they're going to use your data platform, they can kind of shortcut all that because you've dealt with it all for them. They have access to everything that the different data providers are happy to provide and are willing to provide without additional sign-offs or whatever, or maybe there's special things built into your platform where they can get access to things. But anyway, you know their technical proficiency and you know their pain points, and you can tailor the demo to both of those.
Yeah, that's a key point.
You know, because that's the difference between people kind of just walking by your booth and being like, oh, that's kind of neat, and the people saying that, like, oh, this is something that could be life-changing or transformative and something that I would be willing to pay for because it's so useful.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. So one of the things I've seen over the years is people certainly having the actual demo, live demo, right?
Yeah.
But also at the same time, they have these monitors on pedestals scattered around their booth where a product demo is self-running. And I never liked the idea because you don't know who the audience is. You don't know what pain point it's solving, if any, from the audience. So the only play you have is, this is slick, this is cool, right? That's the only thing you have. And who's willing to pay for that unless it's going to hit that, this is solving my problem. So I never liked that. I always like the idea of signing people up. Walk-ins are always welcome, but you can have multiple demos of different types going on depending on your product portfolio. But knowing that people can sign up and you can reach out to them and say, what is it that you're looking for? Right? What problem are you trying to solve? And when you're astute, what you can do is you can recognize those people in the audience and say, you don't have to call them out. You can say, one of you have this problem perhaps in the audience, and this is how our product helps solve that.
Yeah,
that is the way to kind of really hit the mark, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're spraying with a big hose, right, and hoping something sticks.
No, that's a much smarter way, especially if you're deployed with a team, like conferences, stuff like that, and the team is observing and listening. They can bring back and share the things that they've heard with the audience, so that when it's their time to present, you now can tweak and tailor your presentation for the things that your team has heard, so you're sure that you're resonating with people rather than guessing, oh, we'll do the big bang presentation, all around the world presentation. Because one of the things that, like, especially product demos, I've done a lot of them. The other thing that you deal with in every product demo, just like anytime you do any kind of presentation, corporate presentation, is there is never enough time. Regardless of whatever time you have, like, there is never enough.
That's the universal truth. There's never enough time.
So managing your time in the demo, presentation, demo, whatever it is, we probably could have a whole nother podcast about this, but managing your time in the demo is super critical.
Yeah, because you don't want to just simply do the first 20% of your demo and then find yourself running short of time. So yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the techniques you could use to help you with that is, let's say you have customers that are all, because customers usually attend these things too, right? Whether it's trade shows or whatever. Get some of those customers to come to your booth and be open to talk about how the product has solved their problems. Yeah. And their problems are probably also some other people's problems, the prospects, right?
Sure.
So again, this comes back to get your audience to sign up beforehand, and then ask them the question: what are the top 2 things you're trying to solve today? And align those customers up with these prospects and say, what you're trying to do is already being done for the most part, let's say, by Fred or Mary, and you should talk, right? And I think that buys you a little time, because you don't have to go through the whole thing in detail for that particular prospect. You probably have a scripted demo. You should probably stick to it.
That's very interesting. Like, we used to do that with the logistics customers. We used to connect certain customers to other customers to say, hey, this customer had the problem you're having, and they solved it. Usually we would only do that if they solved it with one of our features that they did not buy. So it is a sales business development opportunity in disguise, but also like a networking opportunity. Hey, I'm going to introduce you to another customer. They already solved your problem. They're living in your future, and also they're spending more money with us, but their pain point is relieved. So that was an easy win
Yeah, I agree.
at the time.
Long time. So we actually flew out at the customer side, you have people that know your tool very well.
Sure, yeah.
And can train other people to use it. We flew out one of those people for an entire trade show to do demos for us. And how we differentiate ourselves from the competition is we're not going to do a demo for you, meaning the vendor, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have a customer get up and talk about how they're using this tool to solve their problems.
Right.
And then queue up this person, and she would come up and she would wax lyrical about how the products really worked out for them. And then leave it open for like contacts to say, if anybody has any questions, contact me. I'm going to tell you how it is, right? Because I'm a customer. I don't work for these guys, right? I think that's very effective. I think you do have to work with them to make sure that. So what's going to happen is that the version of the product that's in production at their site is an older version, undoubtedly, right? By the time a demo comes around at a trade show, you have added lots of features. So you have to train that person saying, well, you may not be using these yet, but this is how it works. Yeah. And now you have double benefit because they're going to go back to their organization, talk about, hey, guess what's coming next, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy. It's easy to do that. All it costs you is a flight and a hotel room.
Yeah.
You know, with a willing customer.
Yeah. The thing about time management in demos for me has been a customer will get on a tangent. Let's hope it's a customer, because I think the more, I'm going to say it from the perspective of a customer, will get on a tangent about one specific thing.
Yeah.
And they'll only want to talk about that for the rest of the demo.
Sure.
And you'll have all the rest of the stuff queued up and you won't be able to talk about it because that's what the customer wants to talk about. However, I've also been on calls where, you know, the executive stakeholder has been on the call, or the salesperson who sold the feature has been on the call with the customer, and they start monopolizing the time talking about a specific feature or really anchoring on one thing, and the customer kind of gets on board with what they're talking about. So like kind of hostile parties have taken over the call. But I don't know if I have a hot take on this one, but like honestly, I never mind that, because like obviously if they want to waste the whole call not talking about any of our new features and just talk about this one thing that is so painful for them, obviously we are solving the wrong thing and we need to pivot to what they're talking about to solve that within reason, right?
Well, if that's
or at least talk about it.
Yeah, we should definitely not shut it down, right? Because that's of relevance, that's of importance to them. You know, as long as you don't have other people on the call that have vested interests somewhere else. Like if you have a general demo, for example, right, where it's not just one customer, it's multiple customers, and one customer is monopolizing it, that may not go all that well. I would probably just say there's lots we can talk about there, right?
Yeah,
I'd be happy to set up time with you separately.
I'd invite him to a one-on-one.
So I mean, definitely that's an option. Yeah. But don't shut down any of these interactions, because you're closing the door in their face and you don't want to do that.
Yeah, no.
To your point about your salespeople leading that, right? That can be trained. That you can say, look, this is a general audience, right? So if somebody wants to go down a tangent, I'm probably going to refer to you and say, can we host another call for that customer? We can deep dive into this matter.
I mean, it might be just for one specific customer at that point.
But if that's the case, then it's their call, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
Go.
Yeah, let's do it. Especially if you know with confidence that the product does what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Entertain them by all means.
A lot of my calls, I've talked on the podcast where when we do stories, those stories generally are one persona per story. I talked about that on the podcast before. And usually when we're doing a demo, unless the features for that one persona are applicable to many people, I will try to just have that one persona represented on the call. So it'll be a demo to that one persona. It does that sometimes mean the engineering team has to tell somebody, hey, join in the latter half of the call. We're going to be demoing to this other persona in the first half of the call. Join in the last 15 minutes or join in the last 20 minutes or something like that. Yeah, sometimes I do that, especially with internal stakeholders. If it was a customer, external customer, I probably would just set up another call, just set up a separate 30-minute real quick thing, because most of my stuff is small. I'm not going 3 months at a time and then dropping my hottest new mixtape or whatever on the internet. Like, that's not the way I work. I want small, so I can get small feedback and then do the next small iteration of that small feedback. Because I have this feeling, and I brought it up here on the podcast before, that customers, companies, everyone has metrics, things that are important, things that they measure, whatever, and then all that stuff falls by the wayside when people have confidence that they don't feel, when they have confidence that you will keep delivering software to them on a regular basis, into the future. When they don't feel like I can't let Brian go because if he goes, I may never hear from him again. He may never give me a feature ever again. Like that fear of abandonment. Do you have development fears of abandonment?
That could be a whole podcast.
I think it is. I
think you're right. If you were in that situation where customers are looking at you as almost like a big key, then yeah, you definitely want to make sure you address that before the demo. Otherwise, your demo is going to be just targeted to that particular aspect only, right? But one of the tips I can share with people that are looking to improve doing demos is, by all means, record it and watch your recording, right? And show it to people that aren't in the demo at the time because they won't have context continuity, and ask them, how can I improve? What do you see here that doesn't make sense? What's disjointed about this demo for you? If you're in the demo, you understand what's being said prior and you kind of get the context. So you get feedback. It's all valuable, but it's not as valuable as feedback from somebody who doesn't have the context.
So we're kind of in how to make your demos go smoothly category at this point. We already covered 2, which is asking for feedback. Hey, you're a salesperson, you're an executive, you're whatever. Can you watch my recording? Can you watch my demo? Can you watch whatever? Or attend, right? And give me feedback on my techniques and that I can improve. So you're asking for feedback for improvement. The other one implied in that you're recording is that you are, I like rehearsing, because you can record a rehearsal and send that for feedback without ever going live.
Sure, absolutely. No, exactly. That was my intent.
Especially if you're brand new. If you're a brand new product manager, or a brand new person who's being asked to demo. For example, like the example I started with this podcast is like a junior employee is being asked to demo in front of a large audience. It would be good to prepare that demo, just write down the bullet points, the highlights that you want to hit. You don't have to write a script or anything like that. I'm sure you can, right? But you don't have to do any of that. Write a script, what you want to do, the highlights that you want to talk about, what you're going to do in the application while you're talking about it. Run through it, record it, fire it off to somebody, ask them for feedback, and rinse and repeat. Maybe ask a couple of people. Ask your boss. Ask somebody you respect. Ask somebody in sales. You could ask a couple of people. It's a recording. People can watch it on their own time. If they don't give you feedback, hey, you've lost nothing.
Exactly, I agree. And don't forget to ask your peers as well.
Yeah, but the rehearsal part of that we haven't talked about yet is that you're rehearsing your demonstration at this point. We don't talk about that with sprint demos either. It's like, hey, I have a team. Like, I'm the product manager for the team. I expect the developers are going to be demonstrating functionality. How do they improve at this? We don't ever, I can't recall ever on a development team talking about, hey, we're going to rehearse this sprint demo.
I've come across that in a scaled environment where they rehearse midway through.
Well, that's a little bit different, and I always try to steer my teams away from the concept of like, well, now we have to spin up a whole demo environment and we got to maintain it. And we got to copy all the data to this thing, and it's a whole. I'm like, no. I know. I want to demo the live feature the way we deployed it in production as is. And if it falls over, it falls over. I want to see the real live feature in production. I don't want to see a mocked up demo.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. This reminds me of these cooking shows you see where the chef says, this is how, and they actually put the dish together and then they put that aside and go, here's one I baked earlier. That's right. And that looks golden beautiful, right? It's like, yeah, but how does it really work? So I'm a big fan of that, really. You don't have to go through the extra overheads of setting up environments or anything like that. As long as you can be open and say, this is this environment, this is how it's working, by all means, you can use synthetic data. That's okay, right? But if you use production data where customers can kind of recognize the data, right, that's even better. If you have one customer that you're demoing to, you could do a lot worse than just get a copy of their data because they recognize their data.
Sure, yeah.
Now you get instant buy-in when they see that, as opposed to just mock data, right? So there's a lot you can do as far as gaining credibility is concerned without really spending a whole lot of effort on it.
Yeah, at most of the places I've been, they have at least 2 systems. Most places have 3. Most places have a development playground type of environment, and then a middle ground, either stage or QA or something that looks close to production. Yeah, feels close to production, and then they have their production environment. Some places have 4, very very few that I've seen, but most places have either 2 or 3.
Yeah,
and this goes along to having a backup plan. If it doesn't work in production, you can always open a new tab, flip over to your stage environment that is good, because maybe that's where you test it, or maybe that's where you've done your internal shakedown or whatever.
Yep.
You've got another place ready to go right away.
As opposed to standing there with egg on your face. I agree.
Right.
I absolutely agree. And this is all the more critical when you have integrations with other things, other teams, other products, sub-products, whatever you have. If you have integrations, maybe your stuff is solid. It works, right? Time and again, it just works. Except when you integrate, or on some environment like stage, let's say, and you have this other team's product, and maybe that's where the issue is,
Right.
but you're doing the demo.
Right.
So in that case, yeah, it behooves you to have a backup plan where, to your point, like just swap over to another tab and say, in this environment, it works.
Yeah.
But be open. Like, we're not lying to anybody here. Just say, well, the integration seems to be having a problem right now.
Yeah.
But we have it working in this other environment.
Yeah, a great example of that. I was just talking about flipping between production and staging environment. I remember all the mobile apps have back-end APIs, like integrate with back-end APIs.
Yeah.
And I remember that we had back-end APIs that the responses were hard-coded. In stage, for example, you would always get the response. The response would always come through correctly, because the stage environment doesn't reach out to the real production response, but it would always come back with the proper inputs for the program to use.
Stub data.
So if you had a problem in production and it wasn't returning the proper results, because sometimes bad data got through, right? Sometimes it's just bad data. You could quickly flip over your mobile application to the stage environment. Nobody would be the wiser. Rerun your trial, whatever the demo is, and now you're getting perfect data back every time.
Yeah, but as long as you're open, right, and just say that this is a stage environment, and only this part of the contract is what we're trying to show you. The rest of it is mocked up.
Yeah.
We'll get to that next sprint or next whenever we meet again. That's okay. I think people are okay with that.
It's like the other thing that we haven't said out loud yet, but I want to say it out loud before we get out of the room talking about this, is that there's no point in having demos if you're not going to use the feedback that you get from customers. If the feedback is, this is all great, perfect, 5-star review on Nextdoor, you great neighbors, 5 out of 5 would move next to again. I guess you can get that as feedback. I was like, this is very rare.
You can, but you can still get more, right? You can say, well, how can it be improved?
Right, yeah.
Right? What did you look for? What do you wish for that's not there?
Yeah.
Because, so you can always solicit feedback, right? Even if somebody says it was excellent.
Right.
But yeah, it's a valid point you make. Get the feedback. That is their part of the deal. That's their part of the contract. For showing up, right, at this venue or virtual venue where I'm showing you the demo, your part is you will give me feedback. Mm-hmm. And please be open, right?
Yeah.
To brutal feedback. Every feedback is welcome. If they give you brutal feedback, guess what? Now you've got somewhere to go. You can improve. But if they give you no feedback, you have no idea how it landed.
Well, I mean, this is part, like we talked about knowing your audience, right? I mean, if you're showing a non-technical audience something technical, maybe they can't give you great feedback. But if you're showing the audience something that they're interested in, something that deals with their pain points, if you align your demo up with your audience, number one, you're setting yourself up to get feedback, right? Because they already want to tell you about what they're saying. But the other side of this is, I think about some developers that I've had on my team, that some of them are like real. What's a good way to say? I think about like in a retrospective, you have some people that are like, it seems like you have something to say, but you haven't said anything yet. Is there anything you have to, what do you think about this topic? That kind of drawing people out. Like if you have team members that have that ability, there's no reason to not involve everybody on your team. I think about the different personalities and their different abilities to interact and to sense things. I mean, different levels of EQ to sense things. I guess what I'm saying is you could cover for each other if you're involving the whole team. Now, if you're just going with a sales guy and you're the product manager and you're just going off and demoing stuff and your team doesn't even know that you're talking to customers, like you kind of lose an opportunity that you could have involved them. Not only developing their skills, not only getting them broader experience, but they could have helped you. Maybe you don't even realize it could have helped you. And this is the number one way I think about they could have helped you is your developers are hearing the back and forth, and if they're confident enough, maybe it's their first time or whatever, right? If they're confident enough, they can hook into the conversation and start additional things out. Yeah.
I agree. So I want to say a couple of things here, right? One is, you said earlier, if you're demonstrating a technical product to a non-technical audience, right? Again, this is all part of knowing your audience. If you're doing that, don't use technical jargon. Use their language, right? So that you can communicate with them at their level. So you have to talk their language so that you can communicate. And the same thing applies. I agree, first of all, that developers should be engaged in this conversation, right? Or at least listen initially. But when they do speak, they've got to be coached the same way, right? Don't use technical terminology with non-technical audiences.
Salespeople can help you with that.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. Absolutely.
That's why the main point, you have to ask for feedback on your presentation style, that kind of stuff. All right, so I wanted to reserve. I didn't say it at the beginning of the podcast. I probably should have, but I wanted to reserve at least a couple minutes to talk about experiences with issues during demos.
Issues is a good way to put it.
I was going to call this demo disasters. That's what I was going to reserve a few minutes for us to have fun with demo disasters. I already told you about one where I felt a lot of pain in that moment. You know, the funny thing is, like, there's a lot of stuff in this podcast that I would like to talk about, but I'm trying to keep it super on track. I've been in some demos where some executives come down and start like going on a diatribe about who needs it, who asked for this, who needs this, this is not what we need, or customers that are upset or agitated, like just people that are out of line, basically. But I don't want that to be any part of this podcast, because I feel like if someone's out of line, like, you just hit the red hang up button and you're done.
If you're remote and executives intrude in this way, just tell them to hit Alt F4.
Nah, if they're in person, hit their red hang up button too.
Yeah. I like that one even better. So I think this is an important little segment of the podcast. Like, anything that will go wrong, and anything that can't will probably still go wrong. So you just have to be prepared for it, right?
You know the worst feeling about a demo going wrong, again, in the mobile world, mobile development, is because a mobile app, you can do some stuff on the local mobile app, like there is some local processing, because mobile apps have databases on the phones and stuff like that. But in order for them to do anything real, substantial, they have to hit the API that they go to. They have to hit the web server that they go to, the back end. And if your Wi-Fi sucks, what a terrible thing to torpedo your whole demo.
Yeah,
like, we can't get Wi-Fi.
And it's not in your control. It often happens, especially if you're outside somewhere, like at a venue where you're doing the demos. You never know, right?
Yeah.
And you might think that if all the sales glitz that you get from venues, conference centers, or whatever else, they'll say high-speed Wi-Fi available. And sure enough, you go in there, you test, everything's blazing fast. Except in the demo, it just happenstance, right? There's multiple vendors doing demos. Everyone's consuming that bandwidth.
So many people
it happens, right? Yeah. So you just have to know that it's gonna happen. First of all, don't start sweating under your collar, right? It's gonna happen. It's not a maybe. Sooner or later, if you're in the game long enough, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So be prepared, right? Be prepared with a couple of things that you can put out there going to help you, right? Just make sure they're not boomerangs that they come back and smack you in the head, right? But definitely allow for all of these things. I've had things like brownouts occur during demos. Never could have planned for that, but a storm went through real fast and a brownout, and the server blipped. Of course, we didn't have any protection on the server, so the server's now rebooting, and it takes time.
Yeah.
Right? So during that time, you have a choice, right? You say, well, the server's now rebooting, and just kind of everybody's just looking at each other going, this is no good.
5-minute break.
Half the time, people don't even trust you when you say that.
Yeah.
Luckily, in that example, the lights blipped, so everyone could kind of relate to it. But yeah, have a few things. Play this out in your mind with your friends, with your colleagues, your peers, and say, how can we have strategies like that, where if something does go wrong, right, you can make light of it. I mean, humor. Make light of it. I've had an anecdote that I shared with you earlier this afternoon, where I was behind in this almost like a server area, doing things back there, swapping things out back in the days of not enough memory available. And the demonstrator, when we practiced, I said, just continue doing what you're doing, and I will keep doing what I'm doing, right? And I made the comment, ignore the man behind the curtain. Well, she took that to mean that is like a keyword or
it's
cue.
The code word.
So during the demo, she kept saying, ignore the man behind the curtain. She said it a few times before I registered what she was trying to say. It's like, no, it's not time yet, because I couldn't see her. I couldn't see at what stage of the demo she was at. I was trying to just listen and kind of keep up with it. So things will go wrong. That's a given, right? And you just have to make the best of it. Another anecdote I can share is a demonstrator, very, very smart demonstrator. But Their problem was when something went wrong, they would go bright red in the face, get flustered, and start pounding the keyboard.
Yeah.
And this guy, he started hitting the keyboard. We literally saw a couple of keys from the old XT style keyboard fly off the keyboard. It's his frustration coming through, right? But that didn't help, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to kind of know that when things go wrong, don't do that.
Yeah.
Use other people around you to help you too. Like your salespeople are good for that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about when things are going wrong is like when you get stressed and things are going wrong, your mindset goes to a place where you're not taking in the feedback anymore. I think about a demonstration that I was in one time where the customer they were asking the presenter a bunch of questions. This is when I was this is a long time ago when I was a development team member, and the customer was asking a lot of questions about the flow through the application. Hey, why am I coming to this screen? What happens if I have this thing? And they're just hammering the presenter with questions about what if. You know what I mean? And the problem with what ifs is you very quickly come to the end of the presenter's theoretical understanding of the system, and customers have a way of getting quickly exhausting all of the knowledge to get to a point where we're like, we have to look through the code and find out what happens when you get that deep or whatever. But basically, the customer is, when they're doing that, they're expressing frustration with your UI UX, with your user experience, your user journey, basically. If we could have stopped and just graphically demonstrated on a whiteboard
like
or whatever.
a storyboard, yeah.
Yeah, like a storyboard. Like you're going through a user journey map, basically.
Yeah.
You're going through these screens, and then you get to this point, and then it splits off, and you make this decision tree, and you go this way. Like if we could have demonstrated that visually, that would have been something we could take immediately back to the backlog. If X, then Y, then Z. I did it again. Then you go all the way back to A.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it could have been immediately turned into a story for feedback, but because of the way that it was just hammered at the presenter, who was already overwhelmed because maybe something was happening and that's why the customer hooked onto it, then maybe we didn't get that feedback. We forgot that the main point of the demo is not necessarily to get to the finish line. It's to talk about how we can enhance the product, get that into the backlog, and then see you in the next 2 weeks or whatever.
That's a really important point. This actually, I've lived through this scenario where everything was going swimmingly well during the demo.
Yeah.
And it was a demo of an advertising system. So you basically have an editor and you're
Right.
typing text in there. And often you don't want to sit there and actually type text. So you have some text that you save in your buffer, right? And you just paste it in there.
Right.
And I did that. But I was going through the different types of advertisements, and I picked one in the employment section.
Yeah.
And at random, because you have the newspaper in front of you, it's a publishing app.
Sure.
And I put in there, therapists wanted was the headline, and then it's some description of the skill sets needed, etc. So it was a short paragraph, and I had that saved in the buffer.
Yeah.
And as I'm demonstrating this, I paste that in there. So here's some text, I'm going to just paste it in so you don't have to watch me type. I do that, and it hyphenates and justifies the column of the advertisement, right? So one column textual ad. And I hear people guffawing in the audience, what's going on? So I look at my screen and everyone's laughing, right? And it had hyphenated the word therapist after THE, right? So of course they were laughing. Okay. So I laugh with them and I say, well, luckily the system has a feature where you can change the hyphen point.
Yeah.
So instead of having it after E, usually a bad idea to have it after vowels anyway, I'll change it. And I did that live. Wasn't part of my script. So I'm like, here, I'm going to bring up the dictionary and moved it from after the E to after the R. And then I hit the hyphenation button again and it fixed it, right?
Wow.
So it's demonstrating a feature in flight of your demo when you come across that.
Nice.
And like, what else could I have done?
That's fun. Like you just brought up a random memory for me because in a system that I worked on that generated random GUIDs, like you know how like you'll subscribe to something and it'll give you like a confirmation code or whatever. Like the confirmation code, we had to remove vowels from the alphanumeric characters. Yeah. Oh yeah, you know where I'm going.
This is going.
You know where I'm going because it was generating some naughty words and like not like the good 4-letter words. I mean the bad 4-letter words in the quote random confirmation code. We had to remove vowels, and that's how we solved that problem. I don't even think we removed all the vowels. I think we just removed you.
I know.
But yeah, we had to do that one. I don't remember if that was on I don't think it was on a demo. I think that was it, but it very well could have been. It very well could have been. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good one.
It never happened in any of the practice sessions. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, you hit the lottery on that one in front of a crowd. Yeah.
Right.
Congratulations.
I just picked all the random ones in practice, like automotive ads or whatever.
But that's what you do. You get extra credit from the crowd for handling it, for playing it cool and handling it and showing, hey, we're gonna move past it. Same thing with like, the query is taking I'm gonna send to the LLM, and the LLM normally takes 5 seconds in all my prep for the demos, but now it's taking 10-ish seconds or whatever, 20 seconds.
I'll be telling you it takes between 10 and 20.
Yeah, like, play it cool.
If it comes back in 25, it's still not that bad, because you could say, look, the environment we're in, connectivity is not ideal, so it took a little longer.
Right.
And just keep rolling with it.
Right. Yeah. If we're going somewhere on this podcast, this is where we're going, is your presentation skill is the difference between a good and a bad demo, which is tough for people to hear. It's tough because that's product management is probably closest to it. The development team members, Scrum Master probably can help a lot with it, but every team doesn't have a dedicated Scrum Master. Managers maybe are doing it or whatever. So everyone's kind of sort of doing a little bit, but they're doing it so that they can get done with it and move on. No one's really advancing that skill set. So that would be the takeaway, is look for opportunities to advance those presentation skills. Because again, like at the end of the sprint, there will be people with good presentation skills, people with bad presentation skills. Every time that you present, it's an opportunity to improve those skills.
Exactly. I agree with that. Absolutely. And practice does make perfect. You come across all these scenarios. So be the first one to put your hand up when somebody says, who's going to demo this sprint? Just embrace it, right? It's not you. You're just the hands on the keyboard person. The team is really showing the work, right? So feel free.
So know your audience, ask for help, speak the language they speak. A lot of the points we hit on this podcast are...
and have a backup plan.
Yeah. All right. Well, my backup plan is to like and subscribe the Agile podcast, the old Arguing Agile.
All right. And let us know what other topics you'd like us to talk about.